Say hi. As you can see, my son is with me. We're going to do a very brief supplemental video here. I want to talk a little bit about the Psalms of David. Now, as I've been sprinkling out some of the Psalms in my reading, because we don't really know exactly when most of these Psalms are written, so I thought I'd spread it out. But we're getting towards the reign of King David, or the life of King David. And out of 150 Psalms, 76 of them are credited to David. Now, most scholars will agree that a number of these Psalms were not actually written by David. But for my purposes, I am going to assume that they all were. Right? All written by David?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, even my son agrees. They were all written by David. But this raises the question of when in his life were they written. I mean, he was king for, I think, 37 years. And he was on the run from Saul for several years. He served in Saul's court. He was probably in his 80s by the time he died. So when, in this nice long life, did he write all of these Psalms? On most of them, we just don't know. There are some that the Hebrew title of the Psalm tells us when it was written, or at least gives an indication of when it was written. But even these aren't 100% certain. There are some textual clues as well. For instance, Psalms that reference the city of Jerusalem. We can safely say were written after the time that he conquered the city and made it his capital. There are other things like talking about the holy city of the Lord and things like this, Zion, Mount Zion, city of Zion. And these things generally come after the time that he conquered Jerusalem. Other things we don't really know, that we don't have any indication. Now, there are some that talk about the temple, which wasn't built until after David died, which is why some scholars say that not all of these Psalms were written by David. And they are probably right. Not all the Psalms attributed to David were written by David. Almost certainly not all of them. But as I said, we're going to go on the assumption that all of them were. Hey. None of that.
No.
Now, I will say there are many of the Psalms of David that have a Hebrew title. There are some that don't. And the ones that don't are less certain to have been written by David. But moving on from whether or not David wrote these, let us consider again when he wrote them. I think we can divide his life into 4 basic time periods. I mean, technically we could go 5, but for my purposes again, I'm doing 4. We have his boyhood before he joined the court of Saul. In other words, before the event of Goliath. We then have his time in the court of Saul or on the run from Saul. So from the time that he joins the court until Saul's death, that's our second period. And our third period is the early time of David's reign when he's consolidating the kingdom, bringing it all together into one united nation and establishing its power, stomping down all of its enemies. And that is what I refer to as his early kingdom. Then we have the period where his son Absalom rebels against him. He has to go into exile. We have all these wars going on. There's other rebellions that happen at the same time. Just a big jumbled mess of his life. And that is the last half or the ending of his life. Now, the last few years he does end in peace. But I include that in the thing. Let's just keep it as 4 basic categories. Say 4. 4. No, hold your fingers up. 4. See? 1, 2, 3, 4. Boyhood, reign of Saul, early kingdom, later end. 4 time periods. Now, within these time periods, I went through all the Psalms of David and decided, kind of arbitrarily most of the time, which time period they belong in. As I said, those that contain headings that tell us when they were written, I generally just put them where I said, because let's just assume that that's right. But there are that only includes, 15 Psalms out of 76. That's 1/5 or 20% of the Psalms of David we have a definite time period for. And the rest of them we don't. So I also want to point out that there are 8 of David's Psalms that are referred to as Messianic Psalms because they have reference to prophecies regarding the mortal ministry of Christ and his atonement. Now, whether David was acting as prophet and was the originator of these prophecies, or if a different prophet had spoken them and David just included reference to them in his poetry, we don't know, but they are there. And a number of the prophecies, these Psalms are the only recorded copy that we have today. So let us go briefly through these 4 periods. The first period, his boyhood. I place only 7 Psalms in this period. None of them are specifically, none of them in their title says they were written here, and none of them are messianic. We then have the second period during the reign of Saul. We have 19 Psalms in this period. In this period, it seems there are 7 Psalms that are actually titled in a way to say that they were in this period. Now, I will say maybe not the title, but either the title or the text tells us that they were in this period. So out of 19, 7 of them definitely in this period. The other 12, I just kind of think they fit in this period better. The third period, the time of his early kingdom. Okay, Nathaniel, you get down now. In the time of his early kingdom, we have 22 Psalms. Only 3 of them can be said from either the title or the text to definitely be in this period, but there are also, this is where we get his first 2 messianic Psalms. In the 4th period, there are 23 Psalms. 6 of them are definitely in this period, and we get most of his messianic Psalms here. This gives us a kind of progression. As a boy, he didn't write as much. He was out with the sheep, and we get just a little bit of dabbling in it. As he becomes a man, he starts writing more, but he writes more specifically about the events of his life at this time period. When he has all the struggles, he's fleeing from Saul, we get kind of a personal touch of a kind of a personal reference to his own life. He becomes king, he becomes settled, and he starts looking more directly to Christ. Then we get the turbulence of his later years, and now he is almost desperate for his salvation. He is begging God, he is pleading him. In many of these Psalms, especially the messianic ones, we read his pleas for forgiveness, because this is after the time of Bathsheba, and he knows that he has failed, that he has lost his salvation. He has lost his exaltation, and he is just desperate for some level of mercy and forgiveness in this period. And we see that a little bit more with these Psalms. So that is the progression. These are the Psalms of David. Now you'll note, just on another brief note, 7, 19, 22, and 23. This only totals 71 Psalms, not 76. The other 5 I do not include with the rest of the Psalms of David. They will be included in a different section of Psalms known as the Psalms of Degrees. And so I include those with that because it is a special set of Psalms, and I will deal with that in a future video. Right now, let us move along into our reading.